Okay. Yeah, so readmes. So yeah, Will's a 6. Will's as correct as you can be. They're off the charts important. And the reason is there's a good chance that the README is the only thing an employer looks at from an entire project that you built. Doesn't matter what you built, doesn't matter how sick it is, doesn't matter how amazing the code is, how much time you spent refactoring. Like, the README could certainly be the only thing an employer looks at, or really another developer looks at when they're like, well, let's see what this person is all about. And you have to think of it as the only way you can make a first impression, right? You only get one when it comes to first impressions. And every single time you put together a project or a piece of software, the README is always going to be first. And you really have to think about how you look at it when you go to another site's README, right? Like, if you go to a GEMS GitHub and you go to the README and they don't have how to use, how to set up, code examples, anything, you're probably less likely to use that gem, right? And so for you all, I want you to think of, if I go to the README and it's not well organized and it's not very clear what's happening in this project, I'm not very likely to think this person writes very good code, right? Like, I'm probably thinking that they're not paying attention to detail, they're less organized than I wish they were, and I'm less impressed with them as a candidate if I'm the employer. So just want to get that out there. Let's take some other, let's get some conversation going. How much time have you spent on READMEs per project versus how much time should you spend on READMEs per project? And I'll open this one up to you all.
A week on a project and about 2 hours on a README.
That sounds about right? Like, about how much time. I would probably expect y'all to be spending less, to be completely honest, at this point. Before I
was rating myself a little high there for sure.
Yeah, a little bit, giving yourself a little bit, a couple extra hours maybe.
And I thought that was a little bit low too, but I guess not.
That's okay. I thought we had one more hand up. Does anyone have anything that they wanted to add to Kwa? Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
I had my hand raised, but I was just going to say exactly what Kwa said, except probably less time on the README.
Yeah,
it's been an afterthought, like, oh, we have to turn this in an hour. Let's write some sentences. Right,
exactly. And that's how, honestly, with the pace of Turing, this is what I would expect. This is where I'm not like crusading to say like you've done it wrong up to this point. I'm saying I get it, right? You have limited time, you have limited cognitive resources, and you spend them writing the code in general, which is fine. And now we're in mod 3. Now we're becoming more professional developers, and now it's time to kind of like shift some of these habits. So this brings me to my next question. When should I write a README? Go ahead, Genevieve.
I think maybe starting it at the beginning of your project so that you have an idea of what it is that you're building.
Wow, I'm blown away by that answer. I think that the idea that you could start with your README to organize your thoughts before you write one single test, one single line of code, is a powerful idea, right? This is a place where now you can say to the world, I imagine my interfaces will be defined like this. Here's how I think my API will work. Here are the APIs I believe I will consume and will be part of this project. Here's what I think this project should do. off the bat. And now that I have a better plan of what I'm going to do, I can probably do it slightly better. Okay, Hope, what's up? Hope, I see you have come off mute, but I cannot hear you. Very low. Okay, now I gotcha.
Okay, last time. Create it at the start, update it throughout the project.
Boom. Now this is adding on to this powerful idea that Genevieve gave us. You start with it, you organize your thoughts. You should expect that the project will change and your thoughts may change as you're kind of working through things. And the best time to update the README is when something changes and you're deciding, I agree with this change, right? I think this change is what I indeed want, and we're gonna keep it and we're gonna update the README to reflect that. So the idea here is obviously the last thing you want to do at the end of a project, you're tired, it finally works, you know, you made a couple sad path tests, but you didn't get to those edge cases, and you've probably like talked more to these other human beings than any human beings in your orbit, and you're ready to be done, and now it's time for a README. That sounds so cumbersome and terrible. That's not what anyone wants to do. And guess what? Your README will reflect that, right? It will reflect that that's when you did it. So I like the idea of getting started with it to organize your thoughts, right? As you're maybe like doing your DTR and it kind of shifts, you start shifting to talking about things you want to do in the project. Hey, let's record it in the README, and we can kind of like go from there. But this can be somewhat of a log of here's where our ideas are now, and here's how they've progressed as you make updates, right? It's going to have a commit history, which is nice, so you can always kind of see, hey, these are the changes of just the README, and yeah, that's another nice kind of way that you can update it using Git to your advantage there. Okay. What goes in a README? What are some things that should live there? Go ahead, Alexa.
The type of technology and software you use to build the application.
I like it. This project is built in Ruby and Ruby on Rails. And there's also some spaghetti JavaScript on this one file. Hope you go look there. Okay, cool. Ben, looks like you're next.
I was going to say example like and steps on how to get it up and running on a local machine. So like instructions on usage.
Absolutely. Instructions. So I would say this kind of idea should be broken up into two things. It's how to set it up and get it running in your environment is one way. And then actual usage of whatever it is, the app, the open source software, that should probably be another part of like how to use code examples, things like that. Because one is environment setup, right? Like how do I get all the dependencies I need and get this program to actually run? And then this other part is like, okay, it's set up. Now, how do I use it?
And I had one question about that. When we're dealing with like website apps that are like there's no specific like command line usage, what does that usage section look like?
So you're saying when there's not any like command line, there's not any commands to run, what does it look like? Yeah, great question. Right, am I saying it right?
Yeah, right. When there's no like when it's being hosted on a website or something.
So this brings me to how I think that you can really beef up your readmes is everything that's an application that is meant to be used in the web should probably have a 2 to 3 minute demo video to go along with it that simply says, this is what my app does. Like, great, I wrote a paragraph about that, but this is what my app really does, right? This is you seeing my app in action. This app that I'm using, I went to the website. So I'll tell you a quick story. I'm like speaking at this conference, RailsConf, and the speakers were all like, we're using we're using this. And I'm in the channel like, should I use this? So I go to the website. The second thing down, it was a great landing page, which I would think of as similar to a README. I watched the demo video. The demo video is 3 minutes. The guy shows me all the cool things you can do with it. And I immediately panic and say, oh my gosh, my talk is going to be so inferior without this software. So they did a great job of demoing how powerful the software was and making me want to use it so bad. So that is the hook that I want you all to be thinking about. When someone lands on that README, how do I hook them into this software that I've just built? How do I make it interesting? How do I make them want to use it, right? Like if we're thinking about the writing and this idea of making a demo, the whole thing is how do I hook someone and get them interested in my product, right? Because that's a challenge and it's something you have to intentionally try to do. Okay, Hope, go ahead. Hope you're still muted.
Social links for the people who made the repo.
Yes, glad you said this. Make it as easy as possible for people to find you. I would say, since you're hunting for a job, obviously most of these README templates and blogs about READMEs are going to say the first thing is, what does this do? Because they are thinking that most READMEs and most people that care about READMEs are developers developing open source. Your goal is different. The developers developing open source want people to use their product. Your goal is for people to become interested in you. So I would say put the links to whatever social mediums that you want to link to, specifically LinkedIn for sure, at the top, right? This project was built by, here are the people, here's what the project does, right? So it's very simple. Like, instead of putting that at the bottom, right? I think you put it right there at the top. Cool, go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah, I just wanted to see what you think about like being transparent about the bugs that your program might have. You know, especially if you're doing open source stuff. Like, is it something worth mentioning, or should you not say anything about that?
If you're doing open source, I would try to not really publicize the product until I'm pretty sure it's mostly bug free, right? There's no software out there that's completely bug free. So I think it's okay to speak to some limitations of your product, but I don't know if I would speak to bugs specifically, right? That's why we have an issues page. That's why there are many issues on open source software that people open up. I think what you can say is, if you find a bug, here's how you go about telling us about the bug. You can define that process, but saying, here's where I think my code is buggy, that's not a great look. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say and talk about. I want y'all to, here's what I'll do. I'm going to put 2 links in the chat. We have simple form and we have our favorite, which if you haven't been to this README that I'm about to drop, I mean, that's why I carved out some time for you to go there today, because it's a great tool that I know you all know and love. And think the README is pretty good. So what I want you to do is take about 6 or 7 minutes, pick whichever one you want, and this is going to be independent on your own. Look at the README. What stands out? All right, I'll just type this stuff in the chat. What stands out? What are they doing well? What would you rethink? Any sections, language, layout? So any part of this README you might rethink and think, oh, I might do it this way. And then anything you don't like. Blatantly just don't like. This isn't good. This isn't helpful. This makes me not want to use the product. Okay, we'll come back at 24 and actually let's come back at 30 and say, no, that's too much time. Let's come back at 28 and take a break as well. All right, does that sound okay? Work in your break here. Okay, 28. Play this recording. Okay, back together. Yeah, let's hear from the group. Ooh, you can answer any of these questions that I asked in the chat. Go ahead, Quad.
I definitely like the table of contents over at the Pride side. It makes it very simple to navigate and get to where I want to go.
Do you mind showing that real quick?
Yes. Because as a user, I'll be searching through a bunch of different websites at one time. And if I will have to read through a lot, I'm probably not going to do it. So having something like this kind of allow me to just like, oh, this is where everything is. Okay, just go straight to the point. So I don't have to scroll through because the amount of web page I look through in a day, it's like resumes, I guess.
Yeah, so how about you click on these just so we can see it in action. Cool, so that goes right to the installation. So this is a great layout, I agree. The table of contents directly at the top. You can go wherever you need to. And they're taking advantage of anchor tags, which are functionality of both like HTML and Markdown, where you create a link, but it just goes to a specific part of the page. And yeah. The other thing that I wanted to follow up on here is let's see how greppable this is. So how searchable. So if we do a Command F right here on the page and we start typing binding. Okay, cool. Now we get right to this place where it's kind of telling us, okay, this is how you use it. You can either do an object.pry or wherever you are, you can do a binding.pry and it'll put you into the scope of whatever object that is. So that's helpful. And this is what I want really, this example is just meant to show you the idea of having a searchable README with the keywords that matter to your application or your open source software. Very important. Cool. Anything else you wanted to add, Kwa?
I can go on and on about it, but I figure I'll let other people take a chance.
Cool. Sounds good. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
And this isn't just like these two READMEs specific. It's more of a question like in most of these big READMEs, I see at the bottom there's sections for licensing, and I was wondering if you were familiar with like what the difference between the licenses were and like when you should apply for a license for an app that you're making.
Yeah, so I'm not that familiar with the different types of licenses. I haven't had to really dig in there. I wouldn't worry about it for the stuff that y'all are building unless you decide to build a gem that you are going to open source, in which case it matters to the people that are going to install this dependency as part of their, production build, then it's going to matter. So I would say don't worry about it unless you're trying to build something that is indeed going to be open sourced and used by whoever, whenever, then you need to worry about licensing. So yeah. Cool. All right, come on, we got a bunch more questions. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I can start cold calling, but I'd rather y'all just volunteer to tell me the parts that you thought were interesting, good, bad, in between. Go ahead, Jake.
Just in the pry, let me share. It's just like how they're giving you like super, let me not make everybody stare at themselves. Like super specific examples of how to use it. Like,
Yep.
There's lots, Pry has far more functionality than I thought it did. And so just showing all this stuff, like when you're just reading words, it's like, okay, I kind of get what you're saying here, but then seeing it in action, I still don't fully understand, but I understand it a little better.
Totally.
And so it's really cool to see that.
I think that one of the limitations of a README is always going to be you can't really understand everything without trying it, right? So you're there and you're like, I'm reading along. I kind of get it, but I don't necessarily totally get it, which I would expect. And so this is a very natural and normal interaction with the README. So these code snippets become very important for you experimenting and getting familiar with this software in general, right? Like the code snippets and the output matching what actually happens in your command line, and that output is important for you to be like, oh, that's confirmation. I'm using the tool correctly, all of that, right? And so, yeah, one of my sub-learning goals of this lesson was to just get y'all to see how powerful Pry is, because it's pretty powerful. All right, I want to hear from one more person. Anything you didn't like, anything you would rethink. It's okay to be critical. We're expected to have opinions as software developers. Cool, let's hear from Chris.
Cool, yeah, I don't have any like criticism, but something else I liked about the Pry, because I think I liked everything about it. Let me just share this. I kind of like how it had like links to different gems to check out that like play nice with Pry. Like I didn't know you could customize the color syntax. And I think up here in the introduction, there's a link to like, wherever it is, like a bunch of plugins that provide like remote sessions and full debugging. Like I didn't even know half that stuff. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Absolutely, completely agree. You're linking to software that extends or enhances your product, right? So that's a great thing for Pry to do, because it helps you as a developer be like, oh, I'm familiar with this Pry already, but here's some things I don't know. Maybe I could get even more out of this tool. Cool, go ahead, Oak.
The README for the first one was really long.
Which one, simple form?
Yeah, it was extremely long, and I did not want to read it all.
Okay, perfect.
And I think it is important, if you're going to make a really long README, to just make documentation somewhere else and link to it.
I like it. Okay, can we have you share real quick?
That was on this. What do you mean?
I just want you to share the simple form README so that we can take a look at it.
Yeah, it's.
Zoom is always a challenge.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, you see how long it is and you're like, oh man, there's so much here.
This.
Yeah. So I would say that this is twofold. Yes, you want to have code examples right here in the README. So you do want documentation within the README. However, it should be greppable, highly searchable. And what would make this better is if there was a table of contents like the prize that you could quickly link to the section that you want, because then you can Command F on that section. Boom, your eyes are already on the page. The highlights come up. Whereas if you Command F kind of from the top, you don't really know what section you're going to from where you are, or if it's actually related to what you're looking for. A table of contents goes so far in organizing, specifically to Hope's point, when this thing is super long, because it becomes cumbersome, it becomes a task, and our lazy brains don't want to go about, figuring out everything about this README. We generally go to a README and we see one example, one thing. We're not usually doing this practice of like, let's just explore this, this README and this technology. We're usually going there for a reason. Anything you wanted to add, Hope?
Yeah, like I specifically said, if you're gonna make a README this long, probably just keep it simple and then link to docs that you've also made for it. If you're looking at docs, you expect it to be long. You expect it to show you everything you can do. You expect it to be a real deep dive, but you need it. A README it doesn't necessarily have to be short, but it should be readable. That's why it's called a README.
I like the idea of concise and succinct are the words that I want to put, not cumbersome and wordy or over the top. I would say finding a healthy balance between some code examples in the README, and then if it's as large of a open source software as Simple Form or Pry, probably having some external docs as well that's purely documentation, but you still want to have some examples in the README. Okay. Let's see what else I wanted to say. So it says in the calendar event that we're gonna that we will do a code share and peer review. We're not going to do that because, to be honest, we don't know how much time you all have spent making your README. So I don't think that that's the most useful use of your time. However, what I would say is every time you think that the README is in a good place, right? One of the best things that you can do is set up with another project team and be like, hey, let's set a date where we're both going to have our README is mostly complete, and let's get feedback from someone who doesn't know. I think on viewing party, probably not the greatest exercise. When you all have different apps, so for consultancy, absolutely a good exercise to do, because now you have people that are not familiar with the code, not familiar with the project at all. So you can use them as first impression guinea pigs to see like, hey, what do they see? What do they not see? What do they like? What do they not like? And this can happen in 5 to 10 minutes, right? That's all you need really to scan a README and know whether there's things that are missing or there's things that are really clear. All right. So I'd say use one another when you have different projects to check and get kind of like pool ideas and resources. Okay. This is another question I wanted to pose. How can we dry up the process of creating READMEs? Any ideas? You're gonna have to create one, I'll say, for every single project from this point onward should have an excellent README in your time at Turing and beyond. So I'll just put that out there. And then so you're gonna be doing this for every project. How do we dry that process up? How do we make it so we're not spending a ton of time creating it each time? Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
This is great because I was just about to ask a question that leads into the point of making templates for. Is it possible to have like a template that's attached to your GitHub account, or is it mostly just on each repo?
Yeah, you can have it attached to your GitHub account and you can say, this is my README template and I'm going to show y'all.
I would definitely suggest making a gist.
Yeah, I think a gist can work. I think where you put it matters less than just having something, right? Like having a good template. So this template I think is great, right? It breaks down. I just posted in the chat. You click on the link. It's like, hey, title, summary, table of contents, getting things up and running, installing. Don't forget about tests, right? If you put this running the tests in the README and you spend some time showing how you execute specific tests, how they can see their simple coverage. Maybe they're not familiar with that tool, so that you can show off your own test coverage within this project. This is demonstrating to employers so much. Care about your code, you TDD, all of the good things. Yeah, and then this other part, deployment, you're probably going to have. If you're kind of allowing other people to, or you're telling people how they kind of like can poke around in a live environment. And then, yeah, this is where now with this built with, contributing, versioning, all of this, authors, I think you put authors at the top just based on where you are. And then the rest of it, you may or may not need, right? Like you probably don't need to worry about acknowledgements. Contributing could be a good thing if you think other people are going to add on to this software. Unlikely, but possible. This goes back to, I think it was Joseph that asked, should I talk about bugs? No, well, here's how you should talk about how someone can identify a bug and let you know, all right? And what the process is for PRs. You'll see on like very popular open source software, this contributing piece is generally quite long and quite involved. Yeah, let's go to Genevieve. What's up?
I was just curious because you mentioned potentially recording a video and demoing your software, particularly if it's like a web hosted app. Does GitHub allow you to host videos, or do you have to host that somewhere else and then link to it?
You have to generally host somewhere else and link to it. Well, I should say that's how I've always done it. I'm not sure if GitHub allows you to host videos. I don't think so. I haven't seen it. Mostly I see links in the markdown, and a nice one that I will push y'all towards that you will get feedback from me within is this software I use to do screencasts. It's called Loom. It integrates really well with a lot of different, it's a Chrome extension, so you can immediately like just click the extension, start recording your screen, and it's links really well on GitHub, on Markdown, and like will just kind of like show up. Boom, the video can show up right there in the Markdown file. I use it when I'm doing PR reviews, when I'm demoing like new features for apps that I'm contributing to. Like I work on some of the internal apps here at Turing, and I always do a Loom. No matter what I change, no matter what I've added, I show it that change in the Loom so that someone can see. Something to push you all towards as well, thinking about, hey, should I demo this change on our software to show my fellow developers, my fellow project mates, how this looks in the browser, right? Immediate visual aid. Ben, did you have another question?
Sorry, that was old.
That's okay. Okay, cool. So last things I want to say. There's this one command that I wanted to show y'all. It's in the calendar event. I believe it's Jesse Luoto's blog, possibly. The command is in here. Yeah, okay. Down at the bottom of, I'm gonna link it. Okay. The bottom of this, if you do a Command F for curl, it'll bring you right to it. But this is like a nice way that you can kind of like, what I like about this, you don't have to use this specific README, right? But this is a nice little trick to kind of like it's a one-line command that then you could even alias to kind of populate this template right there in your README file for every project. So you could do it, you could use hers, or you could kind of like create your own here and do whatever your own template is right here. But I thought it was a cool little trick to be like, boom, we're templated on any project that you want, which is nice. All right, that's okay. One last thing, sorry. I'm gonna give you all some time back. So the last thing you'll see or you'll hear me say on my README pedestal is practice doing the little things right. Attention to detail goes a long way. And thinking about what does your technical writing say about your development skills and how can you put your best self forward via the README? All right, things I want you to be thinking about. Okay, I'm gonna give you this time back. We've got 10 minutes till Squishy's project work time. I think if you haven't started on a README, it's the morning time. You got 2 days until the project's done. Today's a great time to start. I'm not going to tell you how to use your time, but I think it is a good time to start. At least get it organized. Use one of these templates. Get the sections where you want them to be, and be like, okay, well, you know, either we're good on this or whatever you decide is fine. But I think at least get started today if you haven't gotten started. Any final thoughts or questions? Okay. Check-in or Squishies start at 10. Got them today and tomorrow, but this morning's from 10 to 12. You still can sign up if you haven't already, if you want to check in with us. And here's what I'll say about Squishies. One quick thing. You know, people come to us all the time and they're like, hey, this employer is asking about such and such. Does any instructor have anything they want to say? We have to know you before we can say a ton. And there's not a ton of like built-in time that's saying, hey, this is really free time for you all to chat with us about whatever. You get to know me, we get to know you. Great. This is like built in for that purpose, and we take it serious, and it's for you. With all that said, it is completely optional. If you have other shit to do, go do it. That's all. That's all from me. Look out for a class survey. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Tim.
Tim.
Thanks, Tim.